Welcome to another video of the How Do I series about Microsoft Dynamics NAV. In this video, I will explain how to create a full Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 backup on Microsoft Azure using the SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. In this video, you will see how easy it is to install the Microsoft SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool, and I will also explain the benefits of using this tool. Please take into account the following prerequisites. You should have a Microsoft Azure subscription. You should also have deployed Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 on one or two Microsoft Azure virtual machines and created a storage and container for backup purposes in the Microsoft Azure portal. I will perform this scenario in 4 steps. First, I will install the Microsoft SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. Then I will configure all the parameters and create my credentials. Next, I will perform a full Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 database backup. And finally, I will restore a Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 database. Microsoft SQL Server 2014 and SQL Server 2012 SP1 have a built-in capability to backup to Microsoft Azure storage. The SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool provides the same functionality for older versions of SQL Server. And this is interesting to know because Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 and NAV 2013 R2 are still often used with SQL Server 2008 R2. You can use this tool also to encrypt and compress your backups. To install the SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool, I will connect remotely to the virtual machine with the database components. Now I will open Internet Explorer and I will go to Internet Options, and on the Security tab I will click Custom Level. Let me now scroll down to the File Download and change the value to Enable. After restarting the computer, we can now download any application on our virtual machine. So now that my computer is restarted, I will open the page where I can download the Microsoft SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. As you can see, you can specify the download options. In this case, I will only download the 64-bit application. After accepting the license terms, the installation will start. Now I will check if the SQL Server Backup to Windows Azure tool service is running. I will go to Services and, as you can see, the status is running and the startup type is set to automatic. Now I will create a new folder in which my backup will be locally stored. I will name my folder Backup. The system will now create the backup file, put it in the local folder, and will also upload the backup to Microsoft Azure. Let me now open the Microsoft SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. I will click Add to add a new rule. First of all, I can specify the local folder for the backup. I will use the specified backup folder. Next, I will specify the extension of our backup file on which the rule will be applied. In my example, I will enter * and .bak. In the next step, I need to decide if I want to use the local or the Microsoft Azure storage. Of course, in my scenario, I will use the Microsoft Azure storage. Let me now enter the storage account name, which you can find on the Azure portal in the storage section. Then I will enter the access key. This one you can also find on the Azure portal by clicking on Manage Access Keys. I will copy the primary access key and paste it in the access key field. Now I will enter the container name, which you can also find on the Azure portal in the Containers tab. If I now verify everything is okay, I will get the message that the account verification succeeded. If I now click Next, I can start with the third and the last step of the configuration process. By default, encryption is disabled, but of course, I want to enable encryption in my example. I will check Enable Encryption, enter the encrypting password and confirm. Compression, as you can see, is enabled by default. We can disable it if we want, but in this case I will leave it enabled because I want to use compression. And then finally, by clicking Finish, I can see all the rules. The rule I have defined specifies that every file in the backup folder will have the .bak extension. It will be uploaded to the How Do I storage account in the container SQL backup, and that these files will be encrypted and compressed. It is important to know in which folder the system will save the backup file. So basically what will happen is that the system will automatically create the backup file and will then save it in the local folder. At the same time, the backup file is uploaded to Microsoft Azure. Let me now go to SQL Management Studio and write a new query for our NAV 2015 database backup. I have specified my local location as the final destination of the backup file. This is the backup folder I already created. If I execute this query, I can see that the backup is created. If we look now at the backup folder, we will see a new back file. However, this is not a real backup file. If I open it, you will see that this is a configuration file containing the data blob name, the manifest blob name, the Azure storage account, the Azure container, and some other data, like for example, compression and encryption data. In my container in Azure, I can find a real backup file. You can only restore this backup with the required encrypted credentials. This is a pretty high level of security for a backup in the cloud, currently only available on SQL Server 2014. As the final step, let me show you how we can restore our backup. First of all, I will create a new restore query for my NAV 2015 database. Also here, I will use my local folder as the backup source. The system will find my backup on Azure and will encrypt it based on the configuration that I showed you in the previous step. When I execute the query, you can see that as a result, our database is restored. To wrap up, let's review the steps of my scenario. First, I installed the Microsoft SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. Then, I configured the rules on the Microsoft SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. In step 3, I created a full encrypted and compressed backup of a Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 database. And finally, in step 4, I restored the Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 database. With these steps, I covered topics about performing a full NAV 2015 database backup and restore on Microsoft Azure, using Microsoft SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. To learn more about this topic, visit the Get Started page and follow the links on the screen. Thanks for watching this video about how to perform a full and encrypted Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 backup on Microsoft Azure using SQL Server Backup to Microsoft Azure tool. This video in the How Do I series about Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 is brought to you in collaboration with Microsoft and Platan.